Thank you. Yeah. All right. Good morning to you all, and welcome to another research methods class. Last week we learned about research ethics. Today we want to build some foundation around how to come out with a research topic and then how to conduct literature review. How to conduct literature review. So you see, if you look at it, we are picking the components of a research paper one by one. And then we are hoping that within the time available, we'll go through each of the major components. So today's lecture is the beginning point of research, defining the research problem. Defining the research problem. Every research is meant to solve one problem or the other. A research that solves no problem is no research. Because research, as we said the other time, is a painstaking activity which is systematic in nature in terms of data gathering, data analysis, data interpretation, among others. So you cannot go through this rigorous process and then there is no problem that is solved. And there are several problems that are addressed through research. Those problems could be practical problems that you face at your workplace. So your workplace, you have encountered some problems where you think that you need further research to be able to clarify. So there could be a problem coming out of that. There could be a problem also arising out of a theory, where you feel that the theoretical exposition may be a bit different from real life situations. So you want to test whether the theory applies to what life. A theory or a research problem could also arise out of an existing empirical gap, where the researcher sees that in a particular area, no research has been conducted so far. So there's an issue to address. So every research must have a clearly defined problem. The problem could be problem you are identifying in real life, solving a problem in real life, or it could just be an academic exercise where you want to confirm a theory or you want to develop a theory. Now, therefore, we say that, are you with me? No. No. We say that to be considered a quality topic, a research topic must address gaps. And there are several gaps. That will be the concluding part of the lecture, so I'll not go there. But suffice it to say that for a research to contribute to knowledge, it means that that research has found some loopholes, some weaknesses, some shortcomings in the existing literature, body of knowledge or practice, so that the research is then engineered by the desire of the researcher to fill this particular gap. So at every point in time in your academic journey, when you want to conduct research, that question will always come up. What is the gap that your research is filling? what is the gap that your research, if you are not able to answer this question, then the entire research falls flat. So I can tell you now that later on, when your long essays or dissertations are being examined, the examiner will seek to identify a gap that you have addressed in your long essay. If that gap is not clearly spelled out, then the examiner may have difficulties with your work. So therefore, what are some of the qualities of a good research topic? What are some of the qualities of a good research topic? Number one, we say that a good research topic is developed from a sound theoretical base. Remember, we talked about theory in our previous lectures. Now, because you are contributing to knowledge via a particular research, that research has to follow the footprints of established theory within the discipline or the subject matter under consideration. So that if a research work is not founded on theory and does not seek to create its own theory where there is no theory, then that research is bogus. In other words, that research has no scientific basis and it fails the quality test. So when you come out with your research topic, one of the questions that should agitate your mind should be, what theory or theories could possibly be explaining the topic that I'm working on? You may not know the theory yet, so you have to find that theory through your literature review. We shall come to that. You have to find that theory through your literature review to now satisfy yourself that your topic is sound and is backed by theory. Yes. So for instance, just to give you an example, I shared a paper on the platform and I'm reading from that. Okay, you may not have it. It's a paper with the title Remittances, Banks and Stock Markets, Panel Evidence from Developing Countries. Now, if you look at the introduction, which is the first part, it says, it starts with theoretical predictions on the financial development remittance link are conflicting. The substitution and the complementarity hypothesis are the leading theories in this regard. So when you read just the introduction, it should tell you that this work appeals to theory in the discipline. So you cannot then now read this paper and say that the paper has no roots, because the writers begin by telling you that there are some theoretical issues that have to be addressed based on which this study is founded. So that the authors then begin to unravel these theories in the form of hypothesis. So they say that the substitution hypothesis holds that, then if you go down, on the other hand, the complementarity hypothesis poses that, So the point being made is that a good research topic has what? A sound theoretical base. Without theoretical base, then there's no standing or foundation upon which such research will be rooted. The other thing that we need to look at as a quality of a good research topic is that it must be of interest to the sponsor and then the researcher yourself. If your research topic does not make you happy, but the sound of the topic alone sends shivers down your spine, then it means that it's not good. It's not a good research topic. The topic itself gives you worries. You are not able to sleep at night. Then it's a sign that no. Because the research journey is very tedious. So if you have to be having sleepless nights for the entire journey of the research, it is not worth undertaking such a research. So the research topic must be interesting. It must motivate you to want to undertake the research, and it must appeal to your sponsors and here also your supervisor. And that's very important, because if they give you a supervisor and the supervisor doesn't like the topic, anything you write is wrong. Because he's not interested. Anything you write is wrong. He has no interest in it. So certain times, you may even just go and ask your supervisor, is there something that you think that I can write on? Okay. If he's willing to give you ideas, he will give you ideas. Otherwise, he will tell you that go and read on so and so and so. Or some supervisors will just tell you, go and read about something that interests you. So you have to ensure that your supervisor likes your topic. Or if your supervisor likes your topic, your supervisor will even provide you with materials that will help you to do the research faster and better. So that is very important. The next issue is that the research problem or the research topic should be well defined, having clearly spelled out research questions and objectives that flow directly from the topic. In other words, a good research topic is in sync with its what? Objectives. Because we've had several situations where students have presented research work. The topic is different, the objectives are different. So at the end of the day, you don't know what the direction of the work is. So a good research problem or topic has well-defined research questions and objectives. Yes, please. You let him know. You let him know. Politely. Politely. Okay? And that politely will mean that you must do your own homework to be able to show to him why there's a better way of going around the same work. Okay? Because if I give you a research topic and then it doesn't interest you, the speed that I want you to run with, you cannot run with that speed. And there will be conflict between us. I will think that you are not serious, not knowing that you are struggling with the thing. You are not happy with it. So at least there has to be some middle ground. There has to be some compromises along the way, okay, from you and sometimes also from the supervisor. But the interest aspect is very, very important. Then the resource requirements, very important. Because every research topic has to be weighed against the time that is available for it to be done. So if, for instance, the term paper, we expect you to use about 3 to 4 months to complete everything, and you go and pick a topic that looks like a PhD thesis. The resource requirements are too much for that particular topic in terms of the time and even finance and even data, because sometimes a PhD student can use the whole year just looking for data. Whole year, you are looking for data, you are not getting the data. Or sometimes you are even just waiting for your supervisor to approve your questionnaire for you to go to the field and now collect the data. You are not getting the approval. So when you are choosing the topic, be mindful of the resource requirement. It may look very fantastic, very interesting, but question is, can it be conducted within the time frame of the program? If the answer is no, please, you have to trim it down. Then we talked about it, contribution to knowledge. There is a good research topic contributes to what? Knowledge. It has a clear-cut contribution to knowledge. And this is particularly important when you are dealing with academic theses and dissertations. It will be difficult to have your thesis and dissertations pass if they are not contributing to any knowledge. Yes. Now, yes, please. Yes.
So that should be by you can't get a research program where you are writing.
You can. Subjectivists have theories. Theories. Subjectivists have theories. Objectivists have theories. Where there's no theory, they create one. Okay? They create one. So, regardless of your philosophical stance, theory is important. But remember that I said that where the issue is so novel, the research topic is so novel that there's no existing theory on it, then that research must have as part of its quest to generate theory or to point to future researchers where they can pass in order to find the theory. Very important. And that is actually a very difficult journey to undertake because you will be questioned in terms of your capacity. What capacity do you have to place yourself at the level of Archimedes, at the level of Adam Smith, at the level of John Maynard Keynes, and all of them who generated theories? Who are you to now also come and say that you are developing one theory? So that's a very, when you are undertaking that path, you are aware of what? The risk. The risk. If you succeed, it's very rewarding. But if you don't, the fall is also very what? Very great. Now, how do you identify research ideas and topics? And we've talked about this in some time past. One of the ways to do that is to question experienced researchers, executives, that's business leaders, decision makers, about the problems they face. And I told you that as a student, one of the ways you can get a research topic is to speak to your supervisor. He has written tens and tens of papers. And most often than not, at the end of each paper, the supervisor will indicate that these are research areas that gaps exist. So I recommend that future research should look at so and so and so. So when you go to your supervisor with the experience can tell you that in our discipline, I've seen that these are now the emerging areas of research. Or I conducted this research, but I couldn't achieve some aspects. So there's some hole there. So you can go there if you are interested. Or you discuss with policy makers, decision makers. All of them can point you to possible areas that research can be done. Another area where you can find ideas is to examine published research, published works. Published works often give pointers. And this paper I've shared, I don't know whether we were magnanimous enough to point to areas of research. So I'm going to the bottom. So if you look at it, that's almost the last two sentences. The authors write, while these measures may not be the best yet, they certainly advance the methodology for measuring financial market development. And listen, we encourage future studies to further explore the construction of multidimensional indices for banking sector and stock market development, and to use them to reassess the fragile bond between finance, remittances, and economic growth. Research gap is shown there, or future research opportunity is shown there. So most often than not, some authors are generous enough at the end of the research to point to prospective researchers some of the gaps that exist. So you can just go to the bottom. Usually that's the last part. After concluding and talking about everything, most journals will require that you indicate what areas for what future research. So if you want to get a research topic, one of the shortest way is to read published work. Then what most students usually do is that they prefer to go to the library and pick what? Grandfathers. If you go to the library down there, they have a catalog of theses, from first degree thesis, graduate level, masters. You have also a PhD thesis, all of them are there. So one of the ways of getting research topics is to pick a research project that has been submitted and has been deemed to have passed. You can get research topics from there. Another way to get research ideas is to attend seminars, conferences, and workshops. Workshops are very vital, and conferences. Because when you go there, people present on various topics. They analyze various issues. And there are heated discussions, a lot of brainstorming, agreements, disagreements. Scholarly work is most often at display during seminars, conferences, and workshops. So when you attend them, you jot down some issues that you feel that are areas that can be taken up for further research. Then call for papers and proposals. Most often than not, journals make calls for proposals. Sponsors also make calls for proposals. There are calls for papers for conferences. All these are suggestive of research topics. I don't know whether I have some call. I recently saw some call for proposals. I'm not sure I've opened it, but if I'll open it later on, let you know. They clearly, when I was reading the call, a lot of research ideas were coming to my mind. Very clear research topics that effortlessly, if I read through the course, I can get a lot of research topics from there. The problem is just the time to now sit down and then turn them into what? Workable research. Then observation. Just by observation, looking now around your environment, the problems that we meet and encounter daily, those problems could also agitate our minds and point us to areas that what research can be done to address those problems that we encounter in our daily lives. So observation is very important when it comes to getting research topic. Now, okay. Now, usually journals, academic journals, they will usually issue what they call for papers. So it's an invitation for authors to submit papers for publication in some outline topics and themes. So those outline topics and themes point to ideas and research topics. The calls for proposals and papers can also come from sponsors. It can come from government and non-government organizations. They are making calls to fund a particular project or research. They will often define the areas of research that the call will what? Sponsor. So those specific issues that are outlined in the call, usually the call, most calls will be 1 page, some 2 pages. Usually they don't exceed 4 or 5 pages, very condensed. Then there's something that I have not put here, special issues. Journals usually have what they call special issues. Now, these special issues are usually some topical areas in a particular discipline that the journal editors feel that they need to generate some body of knowledge around that special issue so that they can throw more light on that issue. So you can have a special issue, for instance, fintech and economic development. So that's a general topic. So when they now come to, they will now break it down to sub-topic. So you can look at the role of central bank in regulating fintech. That's a topic under it. Then you can come and see the role of what? Institutional factors in determining the success of fintech. Then you come down. There are still subtopics that will probably be talking about the nature and organization of fintechs and critical success factors. All these things will be what? Topics or subtopics under the broader call on what? Fintech and what? Sustainable development. So when you get a call to special issue, the subtopics are themselves research topics, which you can then take. Have responded to a number of special issues. And the advantage is usually it has been observed that special issues are read more than regular issues. So let me say, journals usually have regular time periods that they publish. So they are regular issues. But if, for instance, a journal publishes quarterly, but between 2 quarters, it finds that, no, we have to generate interest in a special topic, they come out with a special issue. So that special issue may not be published as part of the quarterly releases, but published what? Uniquely to address what? The topic that the special issue is covering. So special issues are also very important when it comes to generating research ideas and research topics. Now, just an example of some research topics that we can interrogate as we are here. So somebody can have a research topic like an investigation into the level of organizational commitment among employees. So your purpose is to investigate, and take note of the word investigation. That makes it research oriented. Investigation. One of the roles of research is to what? Investigate. So that's the action word. Investigate, to investigate, or to examine, to assess, evaluate, etc., etc. Into the level of organizational commitment among employees. Now, somebody can also have a topic that looks like a study of the antecedents of service quality proposed by prior researchers and how they manifest themselves in the company. This is a more complicated topic. If you are not experienced, don't go this way. And generally, with just some few exceptions, we usually don't want a topic that exceeds 15 words. As much as possible, the topic should be within what? 15 words. So the A is also a word. So if you have to count it off all those prepositions, they are all part of the 15. Okay. So if it is more than 15, it can really be confusing and quite complex. Okay. So as much as possible, the second example, try to avoid it. Okay. Then the third one, measuring the various dimensions of service quality and the service quality gap. Quite simple. So service quality and then the service quality gaps. Okay, 2 issues. Dimensions. In other words, what are the parameters that we can use to measure what? Service quality. And what are the service quality gaps? So these are concrete research topics that you can do. But sometimes some research topics are so easy that if you present them, your supervisor will discourage you because they are so easy. Okay, so easy. So for instance, those that are usually descriptive in nature, wanting you to describe, they are quite easy. Okay? So for instance, what is the average term of employment of staff? Okay? Very easy. Okay? What are the sick leave statistics for the company? Very easy. I can just tabulate the statistics. Very easy. So that we then have to drill down these topics into more researchable nature. So you can put all that in these 2 questions. To what extent does organizational commitment correlate with incidence of sick leave? It's the same thing that we were seeing out there, but this one appears what? More challenging and more specific. Okay, you are counting the words. So these are, then it continues, does length of service influence the relationship in any way? Does length of service influence this relationship in any way? You see that in this particular question, there is the potential for testing what? Hypothesis. Okay? At the end of the day, you have to answer these questions. And you cannot answer them without hypothesis, without testing the hypothesis. Okay? Now, just some further checklists, which you can look at later on, to determine whether a research topic is good. Two main attributes. One, capability. Two, appropriateness. Capability looks at feasibility issues. Is it something that can be done? We already talked about the fact that the resource constraints have to be evaluated against the research topic. So there are several questions that you can ask to determine capability. Then appropriateness, whether it is worth it. Okay? There are a lot of questions that you can look at to determine that. I will not go through that. Any question before we move to research? Any question on how to generate research ideas before we move into literature review? Not necessarily. Not necessarily a formally stated hypothesis, but more or less every research seeks to find out something, and that something is driven by a hypothesis. In other words, what I'm saying is that, for instance, if you look at the research paper I shared, you may not see a formal statement of hypothesis, but implied in the work is hypothesis being tested. Because from the topic, the researchers are seeking to establish whether there's a link between banking sector development, stock market development, and then remittances inflow. So from the topic itself, there's a hypothesis there. Okay, but depending on your preference and also the requirements of your discipline, you may have to state the hypothesis explicitly. In other frameworks, you are not required to state them clearly. Okay? But because some have that preference of wanting you to clearly state hypothesis. If you find that your supervisor is that one who would want you to clearly state the hypothesis, do so. If you are comfortable stating the hypothesis yourself and justifying it, do so. Okay? But more or less, every research will seek to test some hypothesis or the other. Okay. Yes. Yes, please.
Please, I want to take this.
Yes.
Examples of managers. The last question.
Yeah.
Measuring the period dimension service quality, the service quality gaps. I'm looking at the topic and I'm thinking that the topic looks that broader. And then, because if you look at it, they said measuring the period dimension service quality. What kind of service? Talking about here, I'm a little bit confused.
So if you are into especially marketing, the marketing people understand so much about service quality, and the service quality literature has grown very, very well. So we have what we call self-qual. Self-qual is basically a framework that defines various indicators of the quality of service that organizations or shop owners deliver to their customers. So service quality here within this context refers to basically customer handling. Customer handling, okay? So what are the various dimensions? Whether they are looking at the product, the packaging, how it appeals to them, the politeness with which the salespersons welcome them, etc., etc. So there are several, if you take self-qual, you can even search it. It has several, you can have more than 20 individual measures of service quality. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Regarding the Ghanaian,
yes,
that they get the proper what research out of it, but please make that general. The Ghanaian perspective of quality service may differ from that of another country.
So what you are talking about relates to preferences in how topics are stated. For some people, in the topic, they will specify where the study is conducted. In other words, they become very specific, narrowing down what? The geographic location. While for others, they rather state where they want to what? Study in the body of the work. Okay. So when this author is now writing out the research, he will specify my study area is this. And this is why I chose this as my study area. He would go to length and extent to justify the study area. It is not bad to indicate that as a word, as part of the topic. But sometimes researchers are cautious because of experience. So for instance, you can submit a paper to a journal and they will just say that, they will just look at the Ghana and say that most of our readers are from Europe. They are not interested in issues in Ghana. So we are afraid we cannot publish your work. See the problem? So sometimes we try to deceive them small, to hide. You don't make it quite explicit in that. I'll answer that. You don't make it, you may not make it explicit in the topic, but go to indicate that in the body of the work, sometimes to prevent some of these things. But more importantly, usually in thesis, we want you to be as specific as possible. So the geographical boundaries may have to feature clearly in the topic. Okay. All right. Yes.
So the question online is, Prof, please, with regards to stating your research questions, can it also be stated in how form instead of the what form?
Yes. There are several ways you can state your research question. Okay. It can be why, how, to what extent. All these can be used to indicate your research question. Just that when you use each of these question tags, you have to make sure that what you are investigating is not something that is so easy that you just pick one paper and then read the front page and write it out. That's all you have achieved. You have answered that research question. No, that one is not research. Okay. So we want at least the research question to portray that there is some amount of work that has to be done to achieve it. So And that's why usually, most often than not, if it is a thesis that you are writing, if you can just answer the question by just reviewing literature, then you yourself, what have you done? You have not done anything. So most often your research objectives or questions will be things that you yourself would what? Collect data, either from secondary sources or primary sources, and do some analysis. Your research question should portray that you will do some analysis. You are not just going to sit down somewhere and pick people's things, cut and paste, and then say that, therefore, research objective 1 has been what? Achieved. No, you have not done it. Okay? Yeah. For thesis, you have to add it. You have to add it. But sometimes it also depends on the supervisor. Okay? There are differences in supervisor preferences, so we accommodate that. Okay? That done, we can talk about literature review. Now, literature review basically concerns going through previous research and then using that to inform your study. So you go through previous work, understand what they found, how they found what they found, identify contradictions and points of agreement, identify theoretical issues, identify methodological issues, and then also identify gaps that you have found in the literature review. So usually, when you are reviewing literature, you have to be taking notes. Otherwise, you read the literature at the end of the day, you cannot tell what gaps are there in the literature. And if you have not found any gap, then there's no room for you to explore and to do further research. So when you are reading, you underline. Or if you have a notebook, you take notes. And we have a way of mapping literature. I'm sure I will provide a sample for you. Apart from that, literature review itself can be a research on its own, a full research, which is the literature review. So I have written a number of papers, and those papers I have not gone to collect data. All that I have done is that I go through what, and maybe I'll give you a sample of such papers. I just go through existing literature and try to synchronize what? The knowledge. And then the purpose most often is to provide some concerted and unified understanding of a particular topic and make it available for other researchers to look at. So you can write a paper, and that paper will just be literature review. There's a way of writing it. Okay? It will just be literature review. No data collection, no data analysis. The only problem is that you must be good at what? Writing, paraphrasing, and analyzing text. Because otherwise, you can imagine the entire paper is literature review. If you don't know how to write well, it will come out that you have plagiarized people's work. Because most of the ideas, you are not the originator, but you are merely putting the ideas of several people together to form a cohesive body of knowledge. So you must be able to interpret the text, read meanings out of several texts. That is where and when that you yourself can now have what? A literature review paper that you can submit. And that approach may be taken by most of you when it comes to your dissertation. If you learn the art, because it is, though it looks quite difficult, but it's actually the easiest compared to if you have to collect data and now do the data analysis, interpret the results, and then findings and all that. Okay, so when we come to the practical session, we will take you through how to write a literature review. Now, this figure, I've put the slides there, so you can open to that if you can't see this one clearly. It summarizes, if I stop here, the lecture will be good as done, okay? Because everything that will follow after this is captured here. Almost everything we need to know about literature review is captured here. So at the left corner is literature review. So whichever line you follow, you can follow it to a logical end. So if I want to define literature review, I follow this end up to here. Then that's the definition of what? Literature review. It says literature review consists of what? Is investigation of your via process, which includes, well, I'll not go this way. I'll come here. Okay, because this one tells you process. So the process of literature review. Okay, so I'll go process, which includes use for what? Existing what? Literature. Followed by all the while to create so that's literature review. That's literature review. How you can define what? Literature review. All the ingredients or elements of literature review. So which means if we take the definition step by step, we say that it consists of investigating your what? Your topic. So it's an investigation. It's a search process. Your topic. Because I've seen literature review that has nothing to do with the topic. So the literature review is on your topic. Not that you were just searching and something was so interesting to you, then you smuggle it into your work. No. Literature review is not about things that are interesting to you, but things that concern your topic, research topic. And then, via what? A process that includes identifying the keywords. Now, when you are doing your literature review, there must be keywords that derive the review. And most of the keywords are coming from your research questions or research objectives. So usually, when you are conducting research, at least each topic, each objectives must constitute a subtopic for your what? Literature review. That is how you can guard yourself against bringing unnecessary topics into your research work. So at least each objective must form a subtopic. You convert it into a topic. Not that you are just going to state it objective. No. You are going to turn it into a topic under which you review what? Literature. So if you have 3 different objectives, at least when it comes to the empirical literature, you must have at least 3 subheadings, each of which is addressing what? The literature review for specific objectives. Then when you now do the literature search, so you do the searching, and there are several ways that you can do the searching. We'll come to that. Then you evaluate the search results. Remember, I told you that it is not everything that is on the internet that is valid knowledge. Some of them are chaff. So as a researcher, you should be able to distinguish between knowledge and chaff. So when you submit a literature review to me, the first thing I do is that I go and check the references and see where are the papers that you have used to review the literature coming from. Are they coming from areas that are regarded as sources of what? Valid knowledge. Or they are just coming from something that you got on Google or Facebook. And then you put that together, which I will not recognize as what? Valid knowledge. Then again, the literature search, you must make sure that the search includes authorities in the discipline. Because if you are you are doing work on a particular topic, note that that topic there are authorities. There are people that everybody in the discipline know that this person is a leading mind when it comes to that topic. So if you have reviewed literature and then you have not mentioned the person's name, then they will tell you that this your literature review has been what? Done amiss, because the authorities, the leading voices in that discipline have been omitted from the literature review. Evaluating the search is for the purpose of ensuring that relevance. You include relevant materials. Also to include quality materials. Remember, and that's why we told you that for most of your research work, use the search, the databases that the library has provided. Otherwise, you would waste your time and go and do research, and most of the papers that you have used are what? Predatory papers. We call them predatory papers. There are some papers, some journals, when you just submit to them, they will not do peer review. They will just say accepted, pay $35 or $350. They are interested in the money. And you too, because you want the thing to be published, you are just in a hurry to pay. You pay, then they publish. We don't recognize that as what? Valid knowledge. So make sure that when you are reviewing literature, don't include predatory journals. Predatory journals lower the quality of your work. You may be very good at writing, but as soon as they check the references and find that you have used predatory journals, then they will lower the expectation and the confidence that they had in you. Then the purpose of evaluating the research is to find what? Identify gaps. Then, through all that, you have to document your findings. What have you found from the literature review? And to do that, you would have had to take notes. And taking notes, okay, let me just give you this guideline. In taking note, there can be, usually we create, it's not that deep. Okay? In taking note, you need to make sure that you summarize the existing literature. So sometimes what some of us do is that you create a table. I'll create a very long table. So I write full reference of paper. So I'm going to basically cite the paper in its full form. So the author's name of the author or authors, the year of publication, the title of the paper, the journal in which it is published, the volume number, the issue number, and the page number, all that here. Then I come here to write. What method did they use? What method did they use? Okay. So this is paper one. So I'm going to write. What method did they use? Then what is the purpose of this research? Okay. What did they find? This we are not going to write very detailed notes. So it's a summary. So method, I'll say that, okay, they use two-stage least squares. That's all. Okay? So I'm not going to now explain two-stage least squares, this is that, and no. Then I come purpose. Okay, they were just trying to identify what causes lateness to work. Okay, so then findings. They found that people who stay late at night are more likely to go to work late. So I write the findings there. Then at least the last column, what are the weaknesses? What are the weaknesses of this particular paper? Okay, I will say that, okay, this paper could have made a better case had it also applied primary data to confirm the views of individuals on the ground. Okay, so in that sense, the weaknesses I identify here are then pointing me to what? Gaps. We talked about gaps. So paper one, you do that for it. Paper 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In that order. When you do that, at the end of it, it will be clear to you what the gaps are within the body of knowledge. So it's a very simple format of note taking, which you can use in order to what? Identify research gap and to what? Organize your research work. Now, from here, there are a lot of facets of the literature review process. And one of the mechanisms of literature review is what we call a systematic review. A systematic review is a special type of literature review where the source of data for this particular review is previous research. So you are going to take various research works that have been done and reported, and you now use those research as data. So you are going to code them into a software and do the analysis based on the data that you have collected from these empirical or existing research, and now also come out with your findings. It is usually useful when you find that for a particular issue, there is no consensus. Why is it that findings are contradictory on a particular issue? So you can put aside all the research work that have said that there's a positive influence and all that have said that there's what? A negative influence. Identify the methodologies that they have used. Are there weaknesses in there? Look at the time frames that each of them have used. Look at the respondents in each of these research. Look at the type of philosophical assumptions that they have made, all those things. Then look at those papers that are saying there's a negative relationship. All that, you tie them together to come out with what? A unified view about the research. So the data for systematic research is actually existing research or existing empirical work. Yes, please.
Please, sometimes they tell you to quote authorities that with the most current views. You shouldn't take those old views, but so if the old view is still relevant to whatever topic that you want to investigate, how do you reconcile that? Because your supervisor says not this.
So then you have to prove to him that why the old view still stands. Okay? But let's look at it this way. When it is a matter of theory, the age of the literature is not that important. Because if I'm doing a work and the theory that explains it is Adam Smith's theory, who else would I go to if not Adam Smith? Okay? Even though I wasn't born at that time, it is relevant to what? The work that I'm doing. So when it comes to theory, usually time limitation is not important. Unless there's a new theory which is better than Adam Smith's theory and which appeals to you. Because there can actually be a new theory, but you don't agree with the new theory. But make reference to it and indicate your disagreement. And now go back to use what? Adam Smith's theory, because it appeals to you. You think that it is more valid. But usually a good literature review has a good balance of old and what? New literature. Sometimes I know one university, they will say that 70% of your literature should not be more than 5 years old. Okay? So it means that they are saying that 70% must be current. Then 30% can be old. Okay? Because they just want to let you follow the current trends in the discipline, but not forgetting that there are theoretical roots. So in organizing literature review, I often prefer that, especially if it is a thesis, when you have your literature review, you can start with concepts, if there are concepts to be defined. Okay, so concepts. So it will be review of concepts. This is different from your conceptual framework. We'll come to conceptual framework later. Review of concepts. So if I'm writing on remittances, stock markets, and then financial development, then I have concepts. One concept is what? Remittances. I have to define it and then operationalize it. I said what? I define and what? Operationalize. Now, first, you have to tell us what is the literature saying about what? The definition of our remittances. Having said that, but in your work, what does it mean? Does it mean the same as it has been portrayed in the literature, what you have presented, or you want to what? Change the definition a bit. Because the literature may define a concept differently. So they will say that, so how do you define a household? Some literature will say that a household is a group of people who eat from the same pot. Okay, they eat what? From the same pot. Means that when they serve food, all of them, they serve it from what? The same what? Pot. But for you, that doesn't work for you. Because some of the people that are in your study, some of them, they are eating from different pots, but they are in the same household. So you can change the definition to say that your household is just people who live in the same house, whether they eat from the same pot or not. Because these days you can have your father is there, your mother is there, you are also there with your wife. Your father has his pot, you also have your pot. But you are still under your father. So it's a household, it's still a household. So you have to first give the literature definition and then what? Operationalize it. Then we also have what? Other concerns, banking sector development. Etc., etc. So you have to define the concepts, so review of concepts. Then review of theory. Very important. Now, review of theory, here you are going to concentrate on theories that are relevant to what? Your work. Most people make the mistake, they want to review all the theories in the world when it comes to review of theory. So for instance, there are several theories of financial development. Okay? So if I am going to do a review of theory, I'm not going to review all the theories of financial development. I am going to review theories of financial development that are informing my topic, my work. Otherwise, the theory part will look too bulky. And we found that this is really a big problem for most student researchers. You tell them to do literature review of theory, and then they just go and then review the theories without even drawing a link between the theory and their topic. Okay, make sure that if 3 theories speak to your work, you can choose one of them. If you choose more than one, you must tell us that theory 1 explains only this aspect. And that's why I'm adding theory 2 to explain the other aspect that theory 1 is not explaining. But don't just outline the theories. Don't just line them up, but make sure that each theory is addressing what? A particular aspect. Then the last part of the literature review will be review of empirical literature. Review of empirical literature. Empirical literature is literature that has been conducted to address practical issues, to address theoretical issues, to generate new research ideas, to solve research problems. So they are existing research that provide evidence. And that's what I said, you should use this note format to summarize. That's the empirical review part. Okay? Because as for theories, you are not going to review so many theories that will require you to unless it is a literature review of theories. You are not just trying to document theories, so you are just writing that paper to say that I'm writing a paper on theories of what? Organizational behavior. So that one, you just want to what? Base the paper on what? Theories of organizational behavior, as if you are writing what? A chapter or a textbook chapter. Okay, so that is different. But for empirical literature, this is where most of your gaps will come from. You have to outline them. Tell us, what method did they use? What were they seeking to find? What did they find? What weaknesses are in there? And then you'll be making headway. When you have done this, then your literature review will be competent. Okay? These are the key ingredients of your literature review. Review of concepts. Some studies may not have concepts, okay, that they want to define. Sometimes some people take it for granted. Okay? They take concepts for granted, but if you can define them, it's good. Theory, very important, because I find that sometimes a whole MPhil thesis is written, no underlying theory. They usually focus on the empirical review, not enough. Empirics have to be founded on what? Theory. Yes, please.
Sometimes we get some relevant information. Reference is a problem. So how do you go about that one?
It's a lecture on its own. Referencing and citation. I don't know whether to make it a special class, but we have to how to do referencing, how to do citation. It's a topic on its own. Okay, very important. We'll find a way of getting you to learn how to do referencing. But there are several styles, mostly for the purpose of thesis. We use the APA style. The APA style, American Psychological Association, the manual. Their manual for citation and referencing is what we are using. So even before we get there, when you go, you can just Google APA style of referencing, APA. Yeah. That's what we use for thesis and dissertations. But when you now go into publishing, every journal will tell you their style. Some will say that we are using modern language style. Some will say that we are using the Chicago style. There are several styles, as many as you can count. Okay? When you say you get the guidelines as to how to begin before we actually get time to treat referencing and citation as one of the topics. Yes, please.
So my question is on the issue of theory.
Yes.
So let's say you have about 3 or 4 theories.
Yes.
That's all talk about your research topic. Can you do that with your review of theories?
Yes.
All the 3.
All the 3.
Talks about.
If they are talking about the same thing, there's no need. You just pick one. Okay, if they are talking about the same thing, you don't repeat yourself.
State all the 3 and then maybe decide that you want to go with one.
Why? Why waste your time? Why don't just go with that one? Because time is of the essence and space is also of the essence. Okay, so if you can just tell that this theory, or what you can do you can say that, okay, there are many theories that deal with what? Organizational behavior, namely A, B, C, D, E. Here you are not reviewing them in detail. Say that, but among them, the most appropriate is this. Then you now write on it. You can make references to them. But unless the main theory that you have settled on does not cover all the angles of the theoretical issues, then you can add the others to what? To support them. We have all made those mistakes before. You go and review almost all the theories in that area. Okay? But the right thing is that choose the most appropriate theory. If one single theory cannot support what you are doing, you can combine what? Several theories. And more often than not, if you take a thesis topic, each objective may actually require at least one theory. It is difficult to find that one theory is going to explain all the three objectives. Just one theory, you use that to explain what? Objective one, the same theory. Objective two, the same theory. Objective three, no. It will mean that you are not, the objectives are also the same. That's why it will mean. If the theory is the same, then the objectives are the same. And you are not adding to what? To knowledge.
So I left her. That's what I've joined on.
I have to move, otherwise I will stay here forever. Okay. Now, you can do literature review in two stages. The first stage will be to identify existing themes. And we already talked about what keywords and your objectives as forming the subtopics that you review the literature on. So the best way not to deviate from your literature review is to turn your objectives into subtopics. And when you turn them into subtopics, you now segment it into what? Theory, empirics. Theory, empirics. Okay? Then at the second stage, you now identify and describe past theoretical research ideas. Okay? So we talked about the fact that within the literature review, you can segment them into those categories. But in terms of order of presentation, this order is what I recommend. First, the concepts. When you are done, theory. Then when you are done, you come to what? Empirics. In that order. Okay? So the empirics often come last. Now, when you have finished with the empirical review, sometimes you have what we call conceptual framework. And we shall come to that in the next lecture. But just to let you know, conceptual framework, which still comes under the literature review. Some people prefer that once they have conceptual framework, they tie it with the review of concepts. Open this for me. Some people prefer that when there's a conceptual framework, thank you. When there's a conceptual framework, then you tie it with what? The review of concepts, so that when you come, you reserve this one, then when you come here, you review the concepts and then now draw what? The conceptual framework. I'll tell you how a conceptual framework looks like in our concept. But the conceptual framework basically will tell you the linkages that exist among what? The variables under study. The causal linkages and relationships. So if I'm talking about, okay, I have to clean the board. Don't worry. So I'm looking at, say, economic growth. Okay? The question is, what causes economic growth? So there are factors. Okay? There are factors. I'll say that economic growth, so this one I'm going back to my theory. Economic growth fundamentally is caused by what? My factors of production, capital. Okay? It's caused by my what? Labor. And remember, capital here is, we have two capital here. Human and what? Fiscal capital. Okay? Then I'll say that, okay, technology. I have to clearly indicate economic growth is causing what? Economic growth is impacted by what? Capital. So this is how I indicate it, to show that it is capital that is what? Leading to what? Economic growth. The same thing, labor, show the arrow clearly. If an arrow is also shown here, it means that what I'm saying is that economic growth influences what? The labor force, and the labor force also what? Influences. So the arrows basically give an indication of some hypothesis of some kind. So some people would decide to put hypotheses around them. They will say that this one is H1. This one is H2. This one is H3. So I'm saying this. So H1 is telling me that the more capital an economy has, the more it can grow. That's hypothesis 1. So I have to test it. H2 is telling me that when the economy grows, the labor force expands. And when the labor force expands, the economy what? Also grows. That's hypothesis 2. Okay? Then the third one tells me that when there is technological progress, there is what? It leads to economic growth. So this is also hypothesis. So this is a very simple conceptual framework that I have represented. Then I can then now add, because I'm aware that these are not all the causes of what? Economic. Then I then add what? Controls. Controls or control factors, which will represent all the other factors that can influence economic growth, which I have not included in what? These 3 main concepts. Okay? So this is a simple what? Framework, conceptual framework. We also have theoretical framework, but I will not come to that as yet. Okay? But just for us to follow the logic in what we talk about. So what steps do I follow to conduct literature review? Okay. Number 1, you have to clarify your research questions and objectives. Make sure that they are clear enough to you. And once you have clarified them, then you locate and evaluate the sources of information. We saw that in that diagram. All those things are captured. Locate and evaluate. So the sources, make sure that they are what? Sources regarded as valid for generating knowledge. Then you start collecting the literature. So if you have to photocopy, you have to download and save. if you have to screenshot shoot the particular literature, whatever. So collect them, then review and make record of the information. So you take notes. I talked about how to take the notes. Then start writing the initial literature review. It's not easy to start the writing because it involves a lot of reading. Or sometimes before you write one paragraph, it can take sometimes 2 days of reading. Because you have to synthesize all that you have read. Okay? Then identify the gaps in the literature. After you have started the initial literature review, you will begin to identify the gaps. Remember, I told you with the notes, the weaknesses side, the gaps will begin to show. Then examine your research questions and objectives again. It's always a reflective process. When you think that you are about finishing the literature review, go and read your research questions and objectives and see that what you have written is still in line. When you see that, no, it's like I have not covered some aspects of my research questions and research objectives, then you have to collect additional literature in order to meet what? The gaps that you have so identified. Then when that is done, you now prepare your final review report. Yes, please. Yes, yes, it's easy. Not only possible, but it's easy. It will not be difficult. Identifying gaps is actually one of the easiest if you follow the format that I told you. Your inability to identify gaps would only speak to the fact that maybe you have not absorbed yourself deep into your discipline. Okay? Because if you are familiar with, for instance, the research process, we've talked to you about, okay, we have different philosophical stance. We have the way the research process is supposed to go. This is how you do your research design, etc., etc. All those things are equipping you to be able to identify a gap. We've talked to you about how, a research topic should look like. What are the qualities? How to craft a research question. When you now read a particular paper and you see that the research question, the way they have done it, no, this is not how we learned about it. You identify a gap there. So after the gap, it's quite easy way to identify the research gaps. Sorry. To identify research gaps. So don't think that you can identify gaps. No. Have confidence. Have confidence that because when you go to your supervisor will throw it back to you. What gaps have you identified? Your supervisor will not want to tell you the gaps because it will mean that he is just holding your hand and leading you. No, supervisors don't like that. Because if I show you the gaps, when it comes to the analysis, you come and say, how do I analyze this? And I also have my work. You see that? So supervisors want you to be leading the research process. They are only guiding you. Okay? So you should be able to identify research gap at least by the end of this particular literature review. Why do we do literature review? What are some of the reasons? One, it will help you what? To define the research problem and to clarify the research questions. It will give you what? Background information on major issues at hand. It will suggest areas of hypothesis that you can test. It will help you identify the research methods Remember when I gave you the template, we had what? Method somewhere. Yes, so you'll be able to find which method is appropriate for your work. Then it will give you guidelines on how to interpret your research. And then it will suggest theories to you. So you see that literature review is very important. Now, when you are going to do the research, sometimes I change it on my computer and I think that is also here. Now, there are various degrees of risk that we encounter in the research process. And that will depend on the nature of the research topic. So at this side, I'm going to give the description first. New field of study. In other words, that entire area is a black box. Not much or nothing has been done in that area. And then old field of study. That area, there is so much that has been done there. But you still want to do something there. Then the top we have what? New method. The method is new. And then you also have what? Old method. So you have new field of study, old field of study versus new method and old method. Let's look at the first quadrant, where the field is new field of study, then new method. In other words, you are telling us that this particular topic, it has not been done before. Added to that, you are also telling us that the method has not been used before. You are the first to use that method. So not only are you the first to study that phenomenon, you are also the first to what? Introduce a new method to solve it. We say that that one is a high risk endeavor. There's a very high risk of failure when you embark on that route. Now, let's look at the other part where it's a new field of study, but old method. Over there, you should be able to provide some results that is satisfactory. At least your contribution is that it is what? A new field of what? Study. New knowledge is coming out of it. But you are using an existing method that has been established. Okay? Then let's come down here. You have what? Old field of study, new method. It's an old field of study. It is just that you are introducing what? A new method. So your contribution is methodological in nature. So you should be able to produce satisfactory results. Then the one that you should not venture in, old field of study, old method. Everything is old. So what is your contribution? So this last quadrant, you have a problem if everything there is old. It will be difficult for you to find a way into the literature. So, and that brings us to, okay, sources of literature. Where do you get literature from? You can get literature from books, from journals and conference proceedings. Conference proceedings are just publications from what? The outcomes of what? Conferences. Government and industry documents, theses and dissertations, then electronic databases. When you go to the library, they will give you access to electronic databases. And most of the authentic ones are listed here. There are some that are also authentic, which are not listed here. Scopus, JSTOR, Well of Science, Sage, Emerald, Springer, Google, EBSCOhost is not here. Taylor and Francis, Wiley, these are very well established scholarly databases. When you get literature from here, to be genuine literature. And other internet searches. Now, by order of validity and preference, we usually prefer that your literature is coming from journals or edited books. Because when you take your textbook, the textbooks are usually written based on journals, information gleaned. All the theories have been published in journals. This is not the textbook that is generating the theory. So I would not be happy if I see that you are referencing your theory and the theory is coming from a textbook. Where did the textbook get it from? The textbook did not generate the theory. So go to the journal, the original source, and pick the theory from it. Okay? We usually say that the literature review should follow the funnel approach, whereby you start from a very broad perspective, laying the background, the foundation, indicating why it is important to do the review or why the topic is important. Then you talk about what research has been performed or done and what has been found. So you are now recanting what? Existing literature, telling us what has been done and what they have found out. When you have done that, then you are now narrowing it down to your specific area of research, directly addressing the geographical focus that you are dealing with. And then we look at current ideas and hypotheses in this area, more recent one. In other words, when you are doing the literature, it is usually better to be systematic. Start with older literature and come down to the more current one. It shows that you know what has transpired in that discipline over the years, but you are just mixing old literature, new literature here and there. It's not systematic. Then you now narrow down back to what? Your keyword research questions that remain after the literature review. In other words, you are now talking about the gaps. So it is most often better you conclude the literature review by indicating the gaps that you have found, which your work is now going to fill. Okay? Lastly, what is research gap? Because I've used that word several times. And that question will be posed to you several times. What is a research gap? There are several types of research gaps that you can generate. And what I've listed here, there are just only 7. So if all these 7 ways, you cannot find one way, then there's a problem. 7 ways of saying that you have gaps. Number 1 is what we call evidence gap or contradictory evidence gap. Now, here, what you do is that you say that while some research, so I can come here I'm looking for, while some researchers have found that capital promotes economic growth, others have found that capital does not what? Promote economic growth. The question is, why is there what? Contradiction in the findings. Is it due to the differences in methodology or differences in the geographical areas that these researchers are focused on, or differences in the way capital is measured? So to identify these, to contribute to this evidence gap, I am proposing to use so and so and so and so methodology so that I can fill what? That gap of what? Contradictory what? Evidence. Then we can have what we call knowledge gap. Knowledge gap. Here, what happens is that as a researcher, you have seen that in that particular area, no work has been done in that area. I'm hoping to see whether I can get an example to read out to you from one of the papers that I have here. Usually when you read a paper and then the authors begin to say that to the best of our knowledge, they are often telling you that they are the first for all they know. So usually we qualify it to the best of your knowledge because somebody may have written that same thing in French, but because you are not a French scholar, you have not read it. That's why you are thinking that it is new. Somebody has written it in Arabic, another has written it in Latin. So it is usually safe to say that to the best of what? My knowledge. This study is the first attempt to analyze so and so and so and so. That is what we call knowledge gap. It's something you think that has not been done. That's what we said the other part, new study. It's a new study, but you are using what? Old method. Okay? Then practical knowledge gap. Here, we are looking at it. This is what we know. But in practice, what is happening is different from what we know. So there's a gap there. There's a gap between what we know and what we do. Okay? Then methodological gap. Here, what you do is that you examine the methodologies that have been used in the existing literature, identify the weaknesses of those methodologies, and propose a superior one. Okay? It may mean that you are borrowing that method from a particular area to now apply to that area. It may not necessarily mean that you are the first to develop that methodology. It could be that you are the first to develop that methodology. That's fine. But it could also be that in that particular area, you are the first to apply that methodology to the specific issue and to adapt that methodology to the peculiarities of what? The discipline that you are looking at. So that becomes what? A methodological gap. Then we can have empirical gap, in which case you are saying that so far, when we look at the issues under study, not much has been done in a particular area, or some evidence provided, I'm not satisfied with that evidence that has been provided. So I'm also what? Doing an empirical study. Or sometimes it may relate to a theory, and that's where theory gap comes in. Theory gap can relate to one, the non-existence of a theory which you want to create. Two, it can be that there's a theory, but that theory hasn't been tested in a particular location or environment, so you want to test it. So you can apply what? That theory. Then we have what we call population gap. The population gap refers to the situation where you are now covering some unique geographical or demographic group. So you are covering rural and urban. Somebody may just do a study on determinants of economic growth in Ghana. Okay, but you want to look at it sectoral growth. What about growth in industry, growth in services, growth in agriculture? Will they be the same factors? Eh? Somebody may decide to look at it using only Ghana, but you want to compare Ghana to Nigeria. There's a gap there. Somebody may just want to look at it the whole of Africa instead of just looking at only Ghana. What if we look at Africa as a picture? Another person will say that no, Africa is small. Let's use what? Developing countries. Another person will say that no, why don't we compare developing countries to what? Developed countries. Another person may say that why don't we divide the research and look at it in terms of what? Its various impact on women, men, and children. Or you look at people with disabilities. You look at various nuances, okay? That would be population gap. So all these things point to areas, at least 7 areas that you can contribute. So if they ask you what's the contribution of your study, you should be bold to pinpoint. I am tackling what? Knowledge gap. You can have a research that covers almost all of, most of this. And the sample that I provided to you summarize. So let me just read that, then we can close. I hope I get that quickly. In the last part, the authors haven't done everything. They say, to summarize, the contributions of this paper are as follows. Number one, we overcome the use of inadequate proxies for financial development by constructing multidimensional indices of banking sector and stock market development based on a PCA. PCAs. Then they said two, compared to previous studies, we use an array of econometric techniques. So this is a methodological gap that the researchers are making, which enables us to overcome endogeneities, model selection bias, blah, 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 blah. Then three, unlike previous studies, we studied the relationship among blah, 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 blah. Then number four, last but not the least, we capture the potential non-linearities. And this is also methodological in nature, blah, 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 blah. Now, so what I'm saying is that the best way to project your contribution may not just be to say that your gap is just one. You can have compound gaps. You cover so many. That's what gives your research so much strength and so much believability. All right, so that said, any question or contribution? Any question? I'm forcing you to ask a question. All right. How will we are not talking about exam. When we come to on, and that reminds me, so within the week, I'll get you your 10 paper. Okay. Or you want to write exam in class? God, so I'll give you a 10 paper. I'm sure you are already in groups, right? Yes. Yes, so you can use the groups to do the 10 paper. All right, thank you very much.